everybody. Welcome to another episode of What's on Your Mind. I'm your host, Nyemade Boiwu, or as I'm known on social media, That African Butterfly. Thank you for joining us for another week. Here we just talk about different issues related to life and what we're going through and how it all messes with or deals with or impacts our mind, hence What's on Your Mind. I'm so excited to have my guest today, the podcast host of Dad, Bods, and Beards. I have Logan and Tyson. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Oh, the honor's ours.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Before I dive into my questions, do you guys just want to introduce yourselves a little bit and tell a little bit about each of you?
Yeah, Tyson, you go first, buddy.
Oh, okay. It was that way. I had to point that
Yeah,
out.
I'm over on this side.
I'm Tyson. Logan and I got connected through TikTok out of all places a couple of years ago. And we met at a beard competition in Utah. And literally, we just connected really fast. And since we've just been like best friends, inseparable. And a couple of years ago, like last year, we had the weird idea of creating a podcast just about talking about being dads, being fathers, being husbands, and just what it's like being a guy in right now. And so we've really kind of expanded. We thought it was going to be just a bunch of us just laughing it up, and it's gotten really serious really fast, and we've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a blast. And we like I said, we got connected over TikTok where about 2.5 years ago, I just kind of jumped on the post-COVID TikTok train and started making content. It kind of started as a bet with my little sister because she got a dance video that got like 30,000 views. And I was like, oh, I bet you I can get one to 50,000 before you. And here we are today. And I do TikTok and Instagram and a bunch of stuff pretty regularly. And that's, like I said, how I got connected through Tyson. Started doing some, beard affiliate marketing work with him on social media, because if you can't see the logo behind his head, that's the logo of the beard care and men's grooming company that he and we work a lot with, and he's the primary owner of. And we started Dad, Bods, and Beards a year ago, and now we got fully grown giant bearded men crying about our feelings all the time, but it helps a lot of people. I've been married for 11 years. I've got 2 kids. Tyson's got a whole herd of kids. And we just talk about our experience of being fathers, being friends, talking about I've got a pretty substantial history with mental health issues that I've worked a lot through. Tyson does as well. So we just try to be vulnerable and share experience with the guys and people, and pretty much tell people it's not weak to speak. Like you can be strong, and you can be vulnerable, and you can be kind all at the same time.
We just want to be us. That's us. Just who we are, and be authentic and be our real selves.
And that's great. And I love that you guys share that with your podcast. Logan, actually, that's how I found you guys, was through your TikToks.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm a little bit of a TikTokaholic myself, and doing the lip syncs and things, and they were cracking me up. So I love it whenever I can find other people who try to use like the humor of it to make mental illness and mental health relatable.
Yeah, sometimes I get some interesting comments from people, especially the guys that kind of like to peacock and plume their feathers and act like, oh, hey, this is the weakest thing I've ever seen. I tend to make light of some mental health stuff to draw people in with humor and relatability, and then I'll hit you with some serious stuff from time to time. Mm-hmm. And I've had some really good responses, and I say this all the time, but it's more therapeutic for me to make this content than I think it is for people to see. So I continue to make it, because if I get one comment from somebody that says that it helps, then I'm going to keep steamrolling you guys with content, whether you're laughing or you're crying. I love it.
Absolutely. So, I think it's so interesting that you guys both met on TikTok, and then you guys decided to have this podcast. With the stigma around men, especially in talking about mental illness, what led you both to decide to not only talk about it, but to create a platform to speak about it publicly?
What do you think, buddy?
Well, like I said, Logan and I met, and we did not know we were going to create this platform specifically for mental health. It's not a lie. Like, we wanted to talk about being a dad. We wanted to talk about grooming. We wanted to talk about just overall, just our individual lives, and have fun about it with 2 best friends talking to each other. But the more we talked to each other, the more everything came to about how our mental illnesses that we have and what we deal with in our families and our daily life, how it has hindered us, how it's helped us, how we move forward. And then from there, it's just kind of expanded to just like we just being grateful and being humble for what we have and grateful for what we have, because you can either frown upon what you have or you can be grateful for what you have. And one thing that Logan and I have really just come about is we're truly grateful for what we have, and we have turned, I would say, an illness into something that is a positive, and a positive for other people to understand, as well as positive just knowing that, hey, it's rough, we get that,
Yeah.
but there's a way to get out of this funk that you're in, and we're here for you and we love you. And I think for me, we didn't know going into this podcast that that's what it was going to be about, and it's just evolved into something that's bigger than us, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's gotten pretty big pretty quick. I think more and super grateful for that. Like that's been the fun ride.
Now, I think that it's great that it's, it really evolved into this thing where you see the people that you're reaching out and helping with what you do. Can you think of any experiences or anything that's really stood out from the podcast where you're like, wow, this really touched this person, or wow, this was really a moment?
I wish I could pick my favorite. But regularly Tyson and I will share screenshots of DMs or text messages that we've gotten from just different people that are like, hey, I really enjoyed today's episode. I didn't realize, I was struggling with this. Or one that really impacted me is, obviously we cater more towards men, but we like to speak and talk in such a way that it's more of like an inside look into what goes on inside a guy's head that maybe, doesn't come out in conversation with, a partner or a spouse or whatever. Just getting a message from somebody saying like, I didn't realize that my husband was dealing with this, from a lady, and getting her perspective, listening to our podcast, helping improve their relationship, because guys are not the greatest communicators. We will wave that flag. We know it. So I think what really just sticks out to me is somebody saying like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I made an appointment for therapy today. And it's just like, that's huge in a society where everyone says like, therapy's for the weak, or, like, oh, I just raw dog life, I don't take medication. When it's like, it's so much, when you put in the work and you find the right treatment plan for you and you find that group of people that you can really trust, it's just a more fulfilling life when you focus on bettering yourself, because you will inevitably bring up the people around you.
I would say for me, like, we've gotten some unbelievable messages, like,
Yeah,
I would say hundreds, and every one of them means a lot, that, hey, I'm grateful that we were able to help. But the one thing that got me was my wife. So we have 6 kids, and sometimes I struggle. I have a little bit of bout of depression and all this kind of stuff. And there was a point in my life where I was struggling just recently, and I talked about it on our podcast and things that were going through my head. And I talked about a situation that I've already spoke to my wife about beforehand, and she heard it, and she started to break down and cry because she heard it, if that makes sense. She just didn't hear it, but she heard it. And when she came and talked to me about all this kind of stuff, it really meant a lot. So meaning, like, it's therapeutic for me and Logan, but also when people hear, especially your loved ones, and they actually hear you and you're there for each other, it was something special that I haven't had before. And so it was really cool.
It's great that you're able to have that moment. From watching from listening to your podcast a little bit and looking at your reels and things on IG, what I've gathered is that you both, it seems like, deal with depression and anxiety. Is that correct? And Logan, I think PTSD.
No, so we have some friends that deal with that. We work with them that struggle with some PTSD issues. I myself was diagnosed bipolar in 2017. And with that kind of comes the medley of, like anxiety, depression. It's all kind of lumped in, and, it's this fun little package that just got dropped on my doorstep.
Yeah.
So that's my main battle is I have I have bipolar and some, ADHD issues, which I'm pretty sure everybody has ADHD these days. And Tyson, you have your kind of bouts with with
anxiety and depression, but then we
yeah,
have some other things that I have to deal with in the
yeah.
family and stuff. So
It's like a hodgepodge of things. How
yeah.
did you guys, can you share if you don't mind, like, how did you first realize that you were struggling with these? Because especially the, everyone has mental health. Well, everyone has mental health, but everyone has struggles times, right? Where you feel anxious, where you feel depressed. And, people who have really studied or looked into mental health know that the difference between regular and versus where it's like a actual condition that you need to deal with is the length of time or the depth of it. So
Hmm.
how did you first realize, each of you, that it was more than just a sad time or a little bit anxious or my mood's wavering a little bit? How did you know it
Sure.
was like to that next level?
So for me, I was 27 when I was diagnosed bipolar. I'm 34 now, but I had quite a few years leading up to that. I think looking back now, knowing what I know now, I realized I had my first manic kind of hallucinogenic episode when I was about 20 years old. It starts manifesting itself more in young men as you kind of fully mature. But for me, it was just years of just wearing a mask and realizing that things were not going the way that they should be in any sense of the word. Like um, I was suicidal at times. I was making pretty terrible decisions. I was very taxing and borderline emotionally abusive to my wife, just because I was so up and down. Be extremely angry at one point about something, and then 45 minutes later, when I would have a rapid cycle moment, not understand why her feelings are hurt or why she's frustrated. Um, but then I was at the time I was taking a medication for ADHD that I thought was the solution, but realizing I was kind of misdiagnosed as only ADHD, and the Adderall was causing massive
Mm,
hallucinogenic episodes for me, because it's such an upper. It was upping my mania in ridiculous ways. And so I had a couple of instances that led to my wife and a few other people saying, like, we need to get you some help. And got in to see a psychiatrist and a few other specialists, and realized, like, wow, there's some serious stuff going on. And it started me down this kind of treatment path of, and every day is a up and down battle. I don't like to look at it like I struggle with bipolar. I live and manage with my bipolar, because it's a chemical imbalance. It's not going anywhere, but it's my responsibility to take care of it. So
And mind you, I will say this: when he says he's borderline abusive to his wife, it's like never hitting, never anything like that.
well, it's
It's
more emotional up
just
and
more,
down.
emotionally,
more what's going on with him.
yeah.
Logan is an
Was
unbelievably good
was
husband. Yeah, he is an unbelievably good husband. I just wanted to clarify that, just because.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. But for me, I would say uh, there's an individual in my family that has been struggling since junior high, and they're now out of high school and stuff like that. And when I say struggling, I mean struggling to the point where there's self harm and stuff like that. And when that came out, I realized something is wrong on my side too, because the way necessarily I'm parenting, the way I feel about myself, all this kind of stuff. And so I went in thinking, the doctor, I have something wrong with me. This isn't normal. Find out I had low testosterone. So they started doing this. And I went to therapy at the same time. And so I'm taking testosterone and I'm going to therapy now because I want to better myself for my family, so that I can help them through all the situations that we're going through right now, and make sure that I'm the best version of myself, so that I can be the best version for my family. And that has definitely helped me talking through the issues of my life and stuff like that in a safe environment. But when that all happened, the doctor, not the doctor, the therapist says, Tyson, you need depression medication. He's like, there's no reason for you to feel the way you're feeling. Like, after a year of therapy, he's like, you need it.
Hmm.
And he's like, nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong with taking it. You need it.
Yeah.
And so he's like, he gave me this information, said, hey, you can actually test on what medications are going to work for you, so you don't have to guess and your doctor doesn't have to guess. And so I went and took that, and been on medication ever since. And there's still some downs when you get tired, when you feel like you worked a full day and you still are working and all that. But for the most part, when you know you have depression, and when you talk through it with your family, like, I'm talking like crazy right now. We have high lows and gratitudes when we eat lunch or dinner as a family. No matter what, we turn off the TV, we take the phones out of our pockets, and we just eat together as a family. And what will happen is we have high lows and gratitudes. Everyone will say a high, everyone will say a low of that day and what they're grateful for, so that everyone knows their struggles and everyone knows what they enjoyed, so that we can try to replicate that and try to see if what we can do to help. And I think by doing stuff like that and knowing that some of us have depression in our family, that we can work through it together. And if they are having a bad day, it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
we love you no matter what,
Yeah.
and we got your back, and we're going to help you. So that's kind of, sorry, long spiel of your question.
I loved it. But
No, it was great, and I love that high lows and gratitudes. We do your rose and a thorn. Like, what was your rose of the day? What was your
I
thorn
like
of the
that.
day?
I love that.
Yeah. And it's a great way to open up the conversation and to just get things talking. I love that you talk about medication. I find that even as we are slowly getting better about talking about mental health, the medication side of it is still very taboo. And people still sort of see it as a weakness. And I think it's, well, not think, I know it's because a lot of times when we talk about mental health and the different things we struggle with, we talk about it in terms of our feelings, right? Like,
Yeah.
I feel depressed, I feel anxious. So there's a part of you that feels like, well, you should be able to think your way out of those feelings and think your way better and be strong enough to think differently. But we forget that it's mental, it's your brain. Like, every other organ and every other thing that goes through your different organs that are impacted, so is your brain health. And you can't really like think your way necessarily to creating the things that you need to create to make it work. I always
Can
associate it with like my asthma, right? Like, no one ever tells me to like be strong enough to breathe easier. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, you need an inhaler.
Just relax.
Yeah.
Right.
But also, here's the thing. So let's say my daughter is in the middle of a panic attack, or she's anxious and she has to take her medication, or she will go through a panic attack. You go to school and a teacher will say, "Oh, I'm having a panic attack." Like, she'll hear that all the time. "I'm so nervous. I'm having a panic attack." All these kids will say they're actually having one, and they're not. They're just nervous because they didn't study. So I feel like a lot of the terminology is like, "I'm having a panic attack." No, you're just stressed because you didn't study. Where my daughter will physically punch herself and will just go stiff and like faint because she's having that panic attack.
Yeah.
And so I feel like people need to be aware, just like when the words that they use and words they choose, so they actually have meaning. Because I have depression. Well, are you sad because something happened, or do you literally have depression? If you have depression, let's figure this out. If you're sad
Yeah.
because your puppy died, I'm sorry your dog died, but let's figure this out. You know what I mean? There's differences.
Yeah.
There's levels, and it is very frustrating because people will use those terms and it takes away from the actuality. It's like, oh, I'm so OCD. Like, no, are you OCD, or do you just like things in a neat an
Yeah.
orderly way? Or I'm really bipolar. Like, are you, or are you just having like mood swings? Like, it
Yeah.
actually means things. And I feel like when we use it in everyday terms, it waters down the impact of the people
Perfect.
actually
Right.
dealing with it.
Well, the one thing I like to explain to some people, because I've talked to some people that had no idea, like, they hear the terms, they experience this, but they have no idea what each one means. Basically, like, if I explain bipolar or depression or anxiety like that to people, it's like everyone knows what a pendulum is, right? Everyone knows the spectrum of a pendulum, how it has the full swing on both sides. I've always explained to everybody that you have a full range of emotions as a human being, period. Like the brain chemicals, the way that everything fires, you can have extreme highs and extreme lows even without a mental illness. You just had a baby, you just got married, you got that job promotion, somebody passed away, things that will take you to that full range of what your extreme of that high or low emotion is. But most people operate within a very small pendulum swing on a daily basis if you have balanced brain chemicals. If you have one that, where you have more depression, you have a tendency to swing towards the darker side a lot easier. Someone like me who has bipolar, I have a tendency to have full range of that pendulum at any given moment without the outside stimulant of a medication or a treatment plan. So I'm a big proponent of medication, but at the same time, I'm a big proponent of like doing what works best for you and understanding that there is no one right answer. And I feel like that's the biggest problem with society, and a big part of the stigma is everybody thinks that they have the answer, when in reality, it's different for everybody. Like, a medication that worked for me for 3.5 years stopped working, and I had to find something new. And there was one period where I was on 6 different pills a day, and I hated it because all of these different side effects, versus this new psychiatrist that I've been seeing for the last 2 years. She has me on one pill a day and one other type of treatment that's a little bit more natural and holistic, and I've never felt so balanced. So I think it's finding what works best for you, and just leaving everyone who's not a professional or somebody that has, a vested interest in your life, like emotionally, like leave their opinions at the door, because at the end of the day, it's who you go home to, and what's going on inside your head that you need to be worrying about the most.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I'll try not to get on my soapbox. It's so tempting. But
Get on it.
I have such a soapbox about people telling people like their opinions are facts and that everything, like, this is the way to do it. Like, there's very, very, very few things in this world where there's only one way to do it. And there's only one thing that works. And like, if people would stop telling everybody that they should do things a certain way, and people would focus on works for them, share their truth, and let people find the people who match their truth, I feel like everyone would be so much happier. But they don't, and it drives me crazy.
Well, that's why I said, because I get people all the time. I will make a TikTok joking about taking a medication, right? And then I'll get people that are like, "Oh, big pharma, big pharma, big pharma." I'm like, okay, but you don't understand. If I stop taking that one pill at night, even though it's not huge, because I've taken 7.5 years to get to this point, you don't know what could come in my life and the devastation that would follow if I stopped. So while I don't love big pharma, I don't love paying my money to them every single month, but somewhere, someone along the line found this one pill that alters my brain chemistry just enough to keep me present for my wife and my 2 babies. So like, why wouldn't I take
that Viagra nightly?
Yeah. So like, why? Yeah, like my thing is why there's the side of dad bods that a lot of people get to see too.
Sorry, I'm sorry. It's probably inappropriate.
But no, but that's my thing is why wouldn't I take it if I found that it works for me and it doesn't have these massively horrible side effects, and I have a medical professional that has proven to me that she has my best interest at heart. Why would I not trust her opinion when all of the fruit of her labor has proven it? So.
Yeah, and especially because I find that because there is such a stigma for medication, it took me a while to accept the medications. So I would do what a lot of people do who deal with mental health struggles is I'd get on the medication, I'd feel better, then I'd be like, I got this. I don't need this.
You stop taking it.
Stop taking it. I'd be like, because I'm good. And then like a while later, I'm like, wait, why do I feel so awful again? I'm still doing, because there is a hand in hand between just the medication and there's natural like self-help stuff and self-care stuff. And I'm like, I'm still doing all these things, but why am I crying at the drop of a hat? Like, why can't I like function? I realize, okay, it really is that chemical, that brain, that whatever's happening in there. Like, I need this medication. But I think a lot of people struggle with that.
I was talking to a naturopath a while ago, and he said whenever you're starting a new medication or you're starting a natural path or not a natural medication or anything like that, he said write in a journal on a daily basis on how you feel. And he's like, because it's going to be a slow process, but all of a sudden in a month from now, you are a different person and you won't remember how you felt at the very beginning. And so that way it'll keep you going and taking that stuff that you're supposed to. I always thought that was a good idea.
Yeah. I've started looking at my brain in the last few years as, and Tyson's heard me say this, as kind of like a supercomputer, right? When you realize what your brain is capable of, like mine, I don't say this lightly and I don't mean to say it in jest, but mine has literally made me see things that did not exist outside of reality. Like my brain projected a full-bodied personage that told me the worst parts about myself, sat on the edge of my bed and told me that I should kill myself. And it was very, very real to me, even though my wife was completely asleep and didn't see him, didn't hear him, didn't even know that he existed. He was real to me. So that's when you understand. I mean, I'm not a chemist. Actually, Tyson is. But when you understand the way that brain chemistry works and you realize that there are things out there, they might be synthetics, but they're designed to help alter just that slight difference or even the major difference. I look at it as, you're not going to go argue with a mechanic on why you should change the oil in your car. Why would you argue with something that if it's been proven to be beneficial, like, and it's working for that person, I'd just keep your opinion to yourself, because like it's not your life. It's you don't know what affects them. But at the same time, if you've found that, exercising, drinking a ton of water and these other natural ways of doing things and therapy, if you've found a way to manage your mental health and your mental illness without medication and that's working for you, I applaud that the same way.
Yep. Absolutely. And now you're both family men, as we mentioned. How have you had any difficulties with discussing your mental health or your mental illness with your family, and like especially with your children? Like, how do you communicate about mental health with them?
Yes. Oh, it
Yeah.
was really, really tough a while back. Like, because you're the breadwinner in my house. I'm the breadwinner. My mom is my mom. My wife. Don't tell her I call her mom. Uh, my wife is the. I mean, she's a stay-at-home mom. Like, we could not function without her doing that, and that's what she chose, and so I support that. And she loves what she does. But since being the breadwinner and all this kind of stuff, I had to be strong. I felt I had to be strong. I felt I couldn't show any weakness. I felt I had to be the disciplinarian. And when kids did something wrong, like not like spank or anything, but like, hey, I'm taking your phone. Hey, you need to go to your room. Hey, say sorry to your mom. You don't talk to her that way. That type of stuff. And now, after going through everything, uh, I actually defend my kids. Not that I ever put them down, but like with each other, I defend. I talk to them and I tell them how I'm feeling that day. Like, hey guys, I know you want to do this, but this is why we can't do this. And like, I explain things to them now instead of saying just no. Or I say, hey, I'm having a difficult time today, and this is why. So please be patient with me. I don't want, I'm not. I don't want to raise my voice. I don't want to do anything. This is how I'm feeling, and they do the same thing. I'm like, hey, from 1 to 10, how you feeling today, and what can I do to help you? And I'll go one-on-one with my son. We'll go for a walk, or we'll go work out, and he'll just talk to me and tell me how his day is and stuff like that. So I'm trying an open dialogue version with my kids. Say, hey, how do you feel? This is how I feel. And it's okay. And that they're going to be loved no matter what. Like, hey, I did something stupid today. Okay, what'd you do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we've all done dumb things, and but I feel like that has caused them to believe us. And like, my daughter came one day from a party, and back in the 90s, when I grew up in high school, I'm 44. I graduated in 98. When I went to school, there was zero like movies. Like, you go to the movies and they're like, oh yeah, this person propositioned me, this person, like, yeah, like that ever happens in high school. What happened to her like 3 times at a party, and she came and told us, and she told us what happened, how it happened, all this. And I feel like if I wasn't able to communicate with her and tell her how I feel and all that kind of, she wouldn't have done that. And so I think it really, really does help, having an open dialogue with how you feel and what's going on in your life, so that they trust
Mhm.
you enough to tell them what's going
Yeah.
on in theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, my babies are still little. I've only got 6 and 8. But my 8-year-old, she is an intelligent little girl. I kid you not. She's just light years ahead of me in a lot of aspects. But one thing that I fear of having such a pretty severe, not to really like, bolster myself up like it's something to brag about, but like having something that can be, pretty severe in mental illness of being bipolar. I worry about the genetic side of it, like what could be passed down to my kids. We've noticed already in my daughter that she does deal with some very real anxious moments where she like can't go to sleep, can't let something go, really worry about certain things, of like way kids are looking at her and talking to her. So we try to be, my wife and I try to be very communicative with her about like talking about her big feelings. And like we have I'm going to plug her really quick. Her name is Courtney Montgomery. She wrote a book called Lily's Special Toolbox. It's a book, a little children's book that helps kids understand anxiety. And it's
Oh,
worked amazing things
love
for my
that.
daughter.
Mhm.
Um, but my wife and I try to be very open with our kids to their understanding, right? Because they're still little, and just our goal is that no matter what happens, kind of like with what Tyson was saying, that our kids will come to us no matter what, and understanding that there's nothing you guys can do short of maybe murder that would make your mother and I like not give you the benefit of the doubt first and listen to you. Because unfortunately, with mental health and mental illness issues, if sometimes when you do start speaking up and you are vulnerable, you will find people that you shouldn't share things with. You will find people that was the wrong person to tell that to. You will get burnt, and unfortunately, in the process of trying to find your people, you will lose some people. So I've had that in my own experience. I've had some highs and lows with different people in my life, but I think the biggest thing is just communication. I mean, we're going to wave that flag until, until my last day, that people don't know what's going on if you don't tell them, and people aren't going to know they can trust you unless you listen to them when they do, kind of drum up the courage to talk to you. So I glean a lot from Tyson, because he's got adult kids and I still have little ones, but he also has a couple little ones. Like I say, he's got 6 kids, but I appreciate his approach at fatherhood, because when I'm over at his house and I'm around his family, you can tell that his kids know that they can trust him, and I try to emulate that a lot.
Yeah, I think that is huge. I'm such a big person on communication. I grew up with it a lot. I think I mentioned on here before, like my mom, before affirmations were as a thing, my mom always had these little like things she would say to us about keeping your head up and you can do anything and we're proud
That's
of you
cool.
and love you. And like to the point where we'd like leave the house and be like, we got it, mom, you love us, keep our head up, we got it, bye.
Yeah.
Out the door. But you realize that hearing that so much, it literally like becomes a part of who you are and the way you think, which is like literally that I can do anything and that like my mom loves me and all of those things. And it creates such a solid foundation for you. And I love, especially Tyson, that you mentioned being open with them about the vulnerable times and when you're down, because I think a lot of parents do try to, be there, be that superhero for their kid, which is great. But sometimes we were talking, the 3 of us a little bit before, about sometimes you need to see an example of someone like working through things and dealing with difficulties to know that it's okay, like what you're going through. And I think being able to see that in your parent or having your parent talk about that is hugely beneficial, because, like your parent can say like, oh, it's okay if you have bad times. But if you only see them having good times, it's harder to go to them when you have a bad time versus like, oh, dad was having a bad day. Here's how he worked through it. And like, no, it's okay. And you feel more comfortable going to someone has dealt with something instead of someone who just says like, oh, you can talk to me.
Well, and don't get me wrong, I still have bad days. I still have my day job is I work in excavation with my brother. We're dealing with big machines and big trucks, and like I've got a farmer's tan by March every year. And I still have days where I come home and there will be, inklings of the way that I used to be, with just like overreacting and the anger and things like that. And one thing that I try to remember a lot is I'm going to probably butcher this quote, but when it comes to kids, because mine are still, and the same thing with Tyson's, they're so young and still impressionable. It says, stop yelling at your kids at night and expecting them to sleep well. Stop getting upset at your kids in the morning and expecting them to have a good day at school.
Yeah.
You need to be their inner voice and their conscience, and not their inner critic. And so I try to build my kids up a lot, because I know there are still times where I have shortcomings and I have times where I will get upset, so that my kids have more memories of like, dad really tries, dad is here, whatever. But at the same time, like, okay, well, dad's mad about something, like, maybe it's rightfully so, because they are still kids. And it's like, you did what? So.
Right. Yeah, it's always so interesting too, like when I hear or read parents say stuff about like, well, you got to toughen them up for the real world. And it's just like, the real world will rock them enough. Like
Either
it's
way.
okay for you to be a soft spot for them. Not saying like, let them get away with murder or let them do whatever, but like, you don't have to make it more difficult for them to prep them for the real world.
Yeah.
The real world will do that on its own. What you want to do is be that person they feel like, okay, coming to when the real world messes with them.
Well, one thing Tyson and I, we say this a lot, and we both firmly believe in it, and we say this is that you can do both, meaning you can be tough and you can be ready to stand your ground, but you can also be kind. And that's one thing we kind of try to teach our kids, is that my little girl she looks exactly like my wife, but she is exactly like me. So she will go stand up for her little brother all day long, and she'll be tough, but it's because of the kindness and the love that she has for her little brother. So that's what we try to say to people, is like, you can stand up, you can be the tough guy, you can be the provider, you can be the rock, you can be all of that for people in your life, but you can also listen, you can also be quiet, you can also be kind-hearted, you can also be empathetic, because I feel like there is more strength that comes from being that type of person than just going around beating your chest and telling everybody else that they're weak because they have feelings.
Right.
So
how have you both found balance between that self-care and the demands of being a husband and a father? And like, have there been any coping strategies or mechanisms that either of you have found that work especially well?
Your mic's off, buddy.
I just said therapy, and then
Therapy.
I
Yeah.
laughed. No, to be honest with you, Dad Bods and Bears has really helped me. Because owning several company or a barbershop and having the beard company, and now we're doing Dad Bods and Beards, and I have so many friends now because of the beard company, where we do lives all the time, and I get to be involved. They're therapeutic, and being around all these positive influences really helped me. But there's days where you got to let the monster out. Like a couple of days ago, I'm like, dude, I got to grind. Like this is just happening, and monster out meaning like your aggressiveness. Like I got to get this work done. But then I'll have my son walk in, and it just turns off automatically, and I'm like, hey buddy, and then I'll wrestle him and beat him, and like as a playful, and we'll go watch Planet of the Apes because that's what we just did. But there comes a time and a place for everything. I really do believe that. I think there's times where you have to be stern with your children, but then at the same time you can switch it just like that and say, hey, I know you just did this and I love you. There is a consequence for doing this, but now let's talk about why you did this, and what can I do as a dad to help you so that you don't feel the way you're feeling right now. And that happened just the other day with my son, where he was very, very mean to his sister, and I took his phone away. That's his life. I mean, that's his life right now in high school. That's his life,
I believe it.
and he did not like that. But at the end, I talked to him one on one. We had a good conversation and find out he's been struggling at school with some people bullying him and stuff like that. And if I didn't stop and take that time to talk to him, I would never know.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that I was able to have that dialogue with him. And so now because I know what's going on in his life a little bit better, I now know how I can help him. And so we go to the gym quite a bit now, and we focus on his core and his body and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes I forget what it's like being a 16, 17-year-old boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Right.
what they're going through, like, because what they're going through might not be the same as what we're going through, but their stress and our stress are equal. Like I'm stressed, but
Yes.
mine might be making a house payment. His might be making, there's a girl that just looked at me, but it's still stress for him, and it still hurts if he doesn't get that attention. And so I just got to always be remembering that we're equal. Like I might have gone through what he's gone through, and know that in reality it's nothing, but he still has to go through it, and it's still impacting his life. And so I gotta just be there for him.
Yes, it drives me crazy when people are so dismissive of teens. Like,
Mhm.
oh, you don't know what real problems are. It's like, it's real to them, and it's a huge deal to them.
100%.
And it's their first time walking through this life dealing
Yeah.
with that stuff. Even a 10-year-old dealing with some like little 10-year-old problem. Like it is their first time coming to that problem. And it is a big deal to them because they have no clue how to navigate those waters. And so it drives me crazy when people are dismissive of problems of younger kids, because it's their world at that time, and it should be treated and addressed as such, because it is a huge deal to them.
Well, and they say that like, oh, kids these days are different, and I'm like, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because like these Gen Z kids are something else. Like, I mean, I'm a
I
millennial.
love Gen Z. I'm a millennial,
They're
but like
like-
I love Gen Z.
The Gen Z is kind of like, they're just like not putting up with crap. Like there's I was reading an article talking about how the fact that Gen Z is starting to get frustrated with how much adults are on our phones, and so they're like putting theirs away. And like, it's like you're starting to see more. Like, I live in a neighborhood where there's kids everywhere. Like, you got to drive slow, or you're gonna take one out. And they're just everywhere in my neighborhood. And I'm like, man, I feel like it's starting to go. It's kind of starting, like the cycle's repeating itself. And like, as 80s and 90s kids, the last couple generations were always inside, and like now it's kind of like there's kids outside all the time in my neighborhood. And I think it's such a good way of doing things. So
I couldn't agree more. And I like that they're just so outspoken. And it's so interesting because there's like a little bit of discourse, especially if you're like on the online world. They're like, oh, boomers and the Gen Z. And it's like, but Gen Z are the children of Gen X, which is the generation right above us millennials. And like, I kind of think of us like millennials as like the older siblings of Gen Z. Like we like paved the way, and they're just like the more outspoken version of it. But I love it because they really embody a lot of what we've been talking about here, of being open and communicating and figuring out what works for you. And I think that's just a good way to go forth as a society.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think kind of going back to your question about balance, and that I think it's there's nothing wrong with like admitting to sometimes that like you don't have it always figured out and balanced, right? Like for me, that's a big one I'm still trying to figure out is I spent so long because bipolar has this tendency to make you very, very, very narcissistic because you're very stuck in your own head. You kind of like you have like no ability to be empathetic at times. And that's where a lot of like the aggressiveness and the rudeness and things like that can come out. And so I try to find that balance of like, I have to be like cognitively aware of certain things or else it'll give my wife the impression that I don't care. So something she's asked me to do, like every other husband, something she's asked me to do 55
You have
times.
to tell them about you and our experience when we stopped what we're doing to listen to our wives.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just I've found that like the balance is constantly changing, the definition of balance. Like sometimes it's I'm a little bit more I'm not doing as good mentally as I should be, so I have to focus on myself a little bit more at the moment. Or if I notice my wife is really needing help with a lot of this stuff, or the kids need more attention here, or I got to jump into work, or kind of like what Tyson and I, some of the stuff we do, I just think balance is constantly changing.
Yeah. And I love that you guys both are open about therapy. I'm a huge component of therapy. I know that people have like their friends they can vent to and all of those things. And I think that's great, but therapists can give you the tools. That's what I say. Like the main reason why you should have therapy, well, your friend may not, they're dealing with their own stuff. So even if they are okay hearing you vent, like it may not be what they're able to deal with. But also therapy can give you the tools to get past some of the things you're struggling with. But I find almost as much, if not more, than the stigma of mental health medication is the stigma of going to therapy, especially with men. So, like, how do you address that, or what advice would you give to either other men or people who have men in their lives that they're like, you need this? Like, how do you help them get over that stigma and encourage them to go get therapy?
So I've been going to therapy for, what did you say, Logan? 2 years, 2.5 years?
Yeah, pretty consistent, almost like weekly, right?
Yeah, weekly. Sometimes twice a week. And I was one of those guys who was not about therapy. Like, not because I was too good for it. It's just money and time. Like, I could do something better with my time and money. But then I learned how much I've grown because of it. Like, there was never anything wrong with me. It was more of these certain instances in my life were affecting me, and I didn't know it. But like, I didn't like I just necessarily shut it down. Like, me talking to him, he's like, so, and then he's like, so wait, let's go back to that. And I'm like, to this? He's like, yeah, so obviously that's a thing. I'm like, oh no, it's not a big deal. He's like, you brought it up, it's a thing.
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden we start talking about it, and I realized, holy crap, that's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah.
And that caused a little bit of trauma and all this kind of stuff, and not realizing that our families and everyone do the best they can. They just continue, and so it's our jobs as parents to continue to be better. But now I'm just like, okay, I can't do this to my children, because this is what was done to me and all this kind. So not only is it bettering myself, but I feel like as I better myself, as I learn to love myself more, as I learn to accept me, I'm even that better of a spouse and a husband for my kids and my wife. And so I'm a huge proponent on therapy. I'm a huge proponent on that, because I've told my mom, I've told my wife, I have 2 kids in therapy now, and I just feel like it doesn't matter if you're good, bad, or ugly. Like, dude, you just need to go.
Yeah.
Because it's just wonderful to talk. And we've had my therapist on Dad Bods and Beards, a matter of fact, and it's just, that's how much I trust him. And I don't know, they're specialized in this, and they're specialized to help us help ourselves.
Yeah. I kind of attributed to like, don't knock it till you've tried it, because for so long the stigma was like, it's weak. Like, oh, you're gonna go talk about your feelings. Like I work in the construction industry. Like the chest beating is a daily thing, right? Like
Right.
everyone's so tough, everyone's so big, everyone's so strong. But like if you give it a chance, and I know that there's therapists out there that are probably not great. And I'm sure people have gone out there and sat down and been like, how did you get a license? Right. But I did cognitive behavioral therapy for a while. So that one was more kind of like peeling apart, the layers of my brain to figure out. We've talked about this where, what is the mental illness? What is a bad habit? What is a personality trait? What things can I affect and what things do I have to work on and what things are what they are.
Mhm.
So I attribute everything back to like if you were talking like if you didn't know something was wrong with the engine in your car and somebody was like, well, this is how you fix it, and you're kind of like, well, that's kind of a weak way of looking at it to fix it that way. It's like I think that when you're talking to somebody who's a professional who has spent a massive amount of time and money to understand the way that the human brain works, whether it's emotionally or chemically, whether you're talking to a therapist or a psychiatrist, like I think it's a higher form of strength to try to improve yourself, no matter what way that looks. So like I said, don't knock it till you've tried it. Until you've had a therapist laugh you out of their office for talking about your problems,
Which they
don't
won't.
exactly. That's my point, right? Is don't say that it's weak because like I'm gonna get on a soapbox here real quick. You guys can't tell. Tyson's 6'3" and he's a former bodybuilder and owns 3 different companies, one of which we own together now. And I have seen him, do some massively, amazingly manly things. But the dude will sit down and tell you about the advances that he's made in therapy. I will tow a 20,000-pound machine around in my F-350. I go through hundreds of gallons of diesel fuel every single week, and I'll jump in a hole and fix the sewer line, things like that. But I'm going to sit down and if I start talking about the things that I went through, I might cry talking about how my wife saved my life.
What's this might? You will.
I will. I definitely will cry. But like I'll talk about the fact that my wife, through just sticking by my side and showing me my worth, is what saved my life and kept me from making an irreversible decision and removing myself from her life and my children's life. So again, don't knock it until you've tried it is like the best answer I have.
Real
Yeah.
quick though, Jacob, Jacked Up Leatherworks, the gun range is my therapy. And I know he's doing that as a joke and stuff like that. However, with that being said, it's legit. Like I'll go to therapy, but one of the things that he said is you got to do something for yourself.
Yeah.
Like you
Hobbies.
need that time and all that kind of stuff. And really, the gym is mine. I love it, but the gun range, I'm not joking. I love the gun range. It's just expensive.
Yeah. Tyson and I talked about one time going to one of those rage rooms where you just smash things and get some things out.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
think those
I
are
wanna know
insanely
those.
healthy. And one thing, kind of going back to the start of the show, I use social media as a form of therapy for me. That's kind of a hobby of mine because, I'll admit it, I do get the kind of the warm fuzzies when I get a message that says like, man, thanks. I didn't realize I was dealing with this. Like I look forward to your messages. I look forward to your, I look forward to all of these different, videos you put out. So find something that brings you joy externally and couple that with some therapy and you'll be amazed what it'll do for your life.
Logan, your dad said he's very proud of you.
Yeah, their dad's in the chat. Yeah.
As he should be.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like I mentioned before, I just love that therapy gives you those tools, right? Because you can talk about things, you can think about things. And as someone who I live with depression and anxiety and especially some suicidal ideation, which is hard to talk about. I was actually watching one of your videos earlier today, Logan, and I had an emotional cry moment because it's
sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just like you were just talking about like the darker side of having like that voice that tells you like not to be here. And I think that, as much as we talk about the strength of being here and going through those days and thinking past those times, there's that like dark side that no one really talks about where when you hear sometimes about someone who has taken their life, there's a part of you, if you're someone who deals with and lives with getting past those suicidal ideations, that like when you hear that someone has done it, there's almost like this, it's so hard to even say it out loud. Like there's this voice that's like, well, if you weren't so weak, you could do it too,
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel like if you've never been there, you don't understand what that voice feels like, but it's there.
Yeah. So I mentioned this before that I had written 3 goodbye letters to my wife over the years. I never gave them to her. I hung on to them for a long time and I reread them over and over and over. I could probably almost recite them to you. It's a different guy, and each one of those letters is a different man than who I am. And dang it.
Sorry.
No, that's the problem is that Tyson and I talked about this, that so many people will say, "Oh, someone took the easy way out." When you realize there is so many different roads when it comes to suicide, of how people deal with it. Some are, it's not that it's selfish, it's that I'm such a burden to the people that I love. I need to remove myself from their life so that they have an easier life. Or some people feel that it's who did we just talk we talked to we just talked to somebody who said that it's like your life is a burning building, and jumping from the building is just a sense of, like, it's a sense of relief, because I'm just going to sit here and burn to death, or I can be free of this now. Is it it's incredibly convoluted and dark and sad topic, and to see some people go down that road where there's no return, it's such a heartache for me to see that, because you wonder what it would have been like if they'd gotten the help that they need, or if they'd had the right person. But sometimes they did get the help they needed. They did have the right people, and things were inevitable past a certain point. So I think if you approach every situation with empathy, and you approach every situation with kindness, you never know what someone's going through. Because for years, I mean, I've seen Tyson have to wear a mask because of business, family, different situations like that. For years, I was the happiest kid, but I wasn't. And I'm gonna kind of out my dad here a little bit, and I know he's watching, but I my first psychiatrist appointment, my dad drove me to. I was 27 years old. I had I had an 18-month-old daughter at home. My son was on the way. Like, I was a man. I had a job. I had, I was the provider. But I sat in a psychiatrist's office, and they were talking about my diagnosis and talking about medication. And my dad said, "Well, we don't want to lose Logan. We don't want this medication to alter his personality. We don't want to lose him. He's always been, our happy, fun guy." But then the psychiatrist taking a moment to explain, like, but that's the mask he's been wearing. The you know the real guy's behind it, and that's what the medication is designed to do, is to help bring that guy out and make him stable. So I think when you realize that there are people that are just dealing with things you cannot imagine, just because your brain can't comprehend it, does not mean that you have any right to tell somebody your opinion, whether it's for or against. So sorry, there's my soapbox for a moment.
No, and it's such a good one too. And I think that it's unfortunate that I think some of us have to be at that, or have had to experience that dark to understand like how important kindness is.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm normally so not. I'm an emotional person, but don't like keep it together for the show.
Let it out. Let it out.
It's been a rough week, but I feel like sometimes, like if you're that person who's been in that space, like you really understand the importance of being kind to people, and that there's no reason not to be kind, because you never know when you're that one thing that either stops someone from going one way or another. And you never know, like even that person, often it's that person who looks the happiest that might be struggling. I know when I was struggling the most, the last thing I wanted was for anyone to ask me if anything was wrong. So I had this biggest smile and I was so happy. And also, I didn't want to put what I already felt was me being a burden onto anyone else. So I made a point of being happy. But if someone had said something horrible to me, like it could have tipped it one way or another. So like that kindness and coming from that place. And it upsets me so much when people are cruel or mean for absolutely no reason other than to be cruel or mean.
Well, the thing is a lot of times they do have a reason. They just don't want to go to therapy and talk about it. Right?
Yeah, that part.
And that's I identified so much with what you were saying, because I spent so many years stuck in this horrible way of thinking about myself, that I realized that I was trying to make other people happy because I didn't want them to feel the way that I felt.
Mhm.
It's kind of like Tyson and I talked about this on one of our shows. It's like Robin Williams. He was the saddest clown in the bunch because he made everybody laugh. He was our childhood. Everybody loved. I don't know anybody who didn't love Robin Williams, but nobody knew he was struggling. Nobody knew what he was dealing with, because he spent his entire life entertaining and making all of us laugh. And that's, I love what you said, and I feel like you could just like, all right, end of show. Kindness, like it's a lot of people say be kind, but that is wholeheartedly something that it'll change the entire feeling in a room. It'll change the entire outcome of a situation when you can really show to someone that you like, even to complete strangers, that you're like, I care about how you're feeling right now. And it's possible to do that even with complete strangers. It's the world. I know it's cliche, but the world would be such such a better place if everybody just like shut up for a second and listen to the person and just just tried to be there for them.
I agree. And I think that that's also part of what, when you said social media is kind of your therapy, it's been like that for me as well. Just because I do like little reels and things about like, well, a wide variety of topic, but especially like mental health and mental illness, just to make it relatable. And also because I find that sometimes when I finally get to a point where I share, usually it's the thing that's the hardest for me to share. Because we all went through quarantine, but 2022, like my world got rocked and I ended up just a series of things, but with a little bit of agoraphobia where like I had literal panic attacks trying to leave my house, like crying, out of breath, like could not leave the house. So embarrassing for me though. Like I'm normally like go-getter everywhere, and like now I'm crying to open my front door. Like what is this?
Yeah.
But when I finally got to the, what was that?
It was scary.
Yeah. And when I finally got to the point where I opened up about it, so many people were like, oh, me too. I haven't been able to talk about it, but me too. Like it's awful. And I was like, oh, and it was therapeutic for me in the sense of like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. But then also like, oh, I'm helping other people by talking about this really hard thing for me. So it's a form of therapy for me too. And I always encourage people like, if you can talk about things, you'll find that other people are dealing with, like, we're rarely as alone as we think we are.
I love that.
I do want to end on a high note, though. So, well, first of all, thank you guys so much for joining me and having this conversation. I think it's very, very important. But your podcast is also now an LLC. So, I know you guys did that today, right? Made it official?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, congratulations. How do you plan on, or like, what other things do you plan to do to continue sort of just addressing and challenging the norms and the notions of masculinity? Because that's really what I think you guys do, right? Like there's this thing that we all think of when we think of bearded men and dad bods, and you're saying like, yeah, you can have that and also be all of this. Like we're challenging what you think that masculinity is, which is what I love about your podcast. And now your LLC, like, how do you plan to expand that? What are you going to do with that?
So we have, so there's the Dad Bods and Beards podcast, and then we now have Dad Bods and Beards LLC. The reason we wanted to do that is because we know there's a lot of, I mean, social media, you can sell merch without an LLC and all that stuff now, but we know what we have and what it could become, and we wanted to think big. And so by creating it officially as an LLC and starting a merchandise line that we intend to have different ways of giving back. So we have a different we have a couple of different people that we work with. One is called it's an organization called I Got Your 622. It's a friend of ours, named Brian. He's been on the podcast, where he provides service dogs to veterans and first responders who deal with PTSD and have just been in those moments that the human brain just can't comprehend. So we did that with the intent of, one, hopefully one day providing both of us with an income enough that we can do this full time, but being able to give back and kind of achieve those lofty goals of turning around and helping people. Like I shared this the other day, and I'm going to share it again. I would love to get to a point, and maybe Tyson will call it the Dad Bods and Beards facility. I don't know, where we create some kind of inpatient or outpatient facility that just helps people deal with the things that that cost a lot of money. Bring someone in that has a situation going on where they can't get to a doctor, they can't get to a psychiatrist, they can't get to a therapist. But we wanted to make it official because just all the different goals and dreams that we have for what we started a year ago, just sitting two friends down, just sitting and talking, it has started to steamroll forward in a very good way. So we wanted to jump on that and run with it. So soon we're going to be, different hats, shirts, different fun merchandise, things like that, but all with a cause of finding, we've talked about finding a different charity every single month and giving a portion.
And then
of
what
it.
we decided, or well, at least I brought it up, I'm like, we should create our own charity where we're helping each other, where we're helping those in need, and we can decide what's in need right at that moment. Like, I thought we started a barbershop, Copper John's did, and I want to eventually have it where we can have people who are homeless or in need, and their children or something needs a haircut, they can come for a haircut for free and stuff like that, where we're paying a barber the salary, and so it doesn't really matter to the barber, like, we'll just take care of you. Like, there's a lot of things that we want to do. We want to create a Patreon that is specifically, it's going to be a low fee, but it's solely just for those people who really want to talk and discuss, and
they need,
and then Logan and I can take time and just actually have a conversation instead of with I don't want to say trolls, but trolls
Yeah.
that DM us and who would be normally part of that conversation, where we can actually have a good deep conversation and
Yeah.
see what we can do for everyone and have a good moral support group. And there's a lot of things we want to do.
Yeah.
It's just step by step, just little by little, we'll get there. But
Yeah.
Love
So that's
that.
what we
And it's
decided. Yeah, just start the LLC and just start the ball rolling, make it official, make it legal, make it happen, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's great that you have the barbershop too. My sister has a nonprofit called Every Man Counts, where we do things for
oh, nice.
men in
that's
the
so cool.
community. And we do monthly barbershop conversations where we get the guys together and in the barbershop and just talk about life and things like that. And we've started incorporating a therapist there for them. So
I
That's
love
awesome.
that. I love that.
Yeah.
We might have to incorporate
Yeah,
something
you
like
are
yeah,
welcome to
send me
the
a link to
idea.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, barbershop conversations. We want it to spread, so you are welcome to use it because I think that'd be cool, especially given what you guys do.
Yeah.
But
I
thank
love
you so much for joining. Thank you everybody who joined. You guys have a lot of great comments, and I was going to scroll through them, and then I realized the time we talked a lot. But
Sorry, we do that a lot. I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. I love it. I loved having you guys here. Everybody, if you are not following Dad Bods and Beards podcast with Tyson and Logan, please do. If you're not following Feel Good Talk, please follow us here. Again, my name is Nyemade. This is What's on Your Mind. This is the last Thursday of the month for May, Mental Health Awareness Month, but we talk mental health year round. June is starting up, which is Pride Month, so that's going to be our focus for next month.
Oh, wait, cool.
Yeah, next week we have, I'm so excited, I have Reverend Brooks. We're going to talk about that weird intermix between human sexuality, religion, and mental health. Like, how do you deal with all of
hot
those? And
topics.
she deals with all three with grace. So we're kicking
Yeah.
off Pride Month
That's awesome.
talking with her. So next
We
week,
need to do something like that.
Yeah,
should.
I think the way to approach that, and I guess last, and not to get too trigger happy at the end, that that's another topic that can get people really fired up. And again, that's the same thing. If you approach that with empathy and kindness, you'll be surprised the amazing people that you shut out of your life because of some stupid opinions.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
sorry.
So I'm here every Thursday, 6:00 live. When is the best time for them to find you?
I have no idea.
So normally we post we have new episodes every week on Spotify and Apple and all the other. You can find us anywhere on the podcast
And YouTube.
and YouTube on Thursday mornings. We're a little delayed at the moment. We've posted on Friday, so Thursday or Fridays when you're going to catch us. Spotify, you can actually watch and listen at the same time. YouTube, you can watch the full video, and then you can find us anywhere on social media. Tyson is Copper John's Beard, where that's kind of the main beard care and grooming, men's grooming page. Mine is just Logan Pete, or if you look up Logan Peterson, you can find me on TikTok and Instagram. And soon we'll be all over Facebook and stuff too with Dad Bods and Beards. So just
awesome.
Google big ugly bearded guy, you'll probably find one of us.
Perfect. Well, thank you both again so much for joining. Thank you everybody joining at home. And again, I'm here every week, 6:00 on Thursday, and I'm Nyemade, or That African Butterfly. If you want to find me on social media too. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.